It's 5 a.m. in Washington, 6 p.m. in Seoul on a Thursday here in Korea. Welcome to Arirang News. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. President Park Geun-hye is in Washington for the Nuclear Security Summit, and the South Korean leader is set to first hold talks with her American counterpart focusing on North Korea, followed by a trilateral summit that includes Japan, then a one-on-one with China's Xi Jinping. At the stroke of midnight, leaders of Korea's three main political parties hit the streets, marking the beginning of the 13-day general election campaign period. Korea's mining and manufacturing sectors recorded the strongest growth in 6 years in the month of February. Although business sentiment also drastically improved, there's still work to be done to improve the big picture, the overall economy. President Park Geun-hye is now in the U.S. for the fourth and final nuclear security summit. The South Korean leader plans to win international consensus on more effectively implementing sanctions on North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Song Ji-sun files this report from Washington.
President Park Geun-hye's multilateral diplomacy will take center stage at this year's Nuclear Security Summit in Washington as she arrived in the U.S. Capitol Wednesday local time. Before the official summit programs begin on Thursday, President Park will start the day with a one-on-one with U.S. President Barack Obama. The two will then be joined by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for trilateral talks, where the leaders will discuss countermeasures and sanctions on North Korea for its recent nuclear and missile provocations. Following a bilateral meeting with Abe, President Park will also hold in-depth discussions on Pyongyang with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The North Korean nuclear issue is not an official agenda at the Nuclear Security Summit, as the safe management of nuclear fuel and better protecting the world from nuclear terror threats are the main goals. But as Pyongyang's fourth nuclear test and long-range missile launch earlier this year once again threaten global peace and security, President Park will seek to strengthen international support and cooperation to quash North Korea's nuclear ambitions. As this was the first time that the world leaders are gathered in the same roof since North Korea's fourth nuclear test on January 6, President Park Geun-hye will not want to waste this opportunity, both at one-on-one sessions and during official programs at the Nuclear Security Summit, to firmly discourage Pyongyang from pushing forward with another provocation like a fifth nuclear test. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Washington.
And in an interview with Bloomberg News ahead of the Nuclear Security Summit, President Park reaffirmed that South Korea is committed to nuclear non-proliferation and that denuclearization should start on the Korean peninsula. Hwang Ho-jun tells us more.
The leaders of 52 countries and 4 international organizations will highlight the achievements from previous meetings at this year's Nuclear Security Summit, including the efforts by individual countries to reduce their nuclear arsenals as they build a more sustainable security architecture for carrying out their denuclearization commitments in the future. Although persuading North Korea to give up its nuke is not on the agenda, President Park Geun-hye says South Korea remains firm on its stance that it will lead the world in denuclearization and not develop its own arsenal. In a written interview with Bloomberg News published Thursday ahead of the summit, President Park says she has a strong conviction that the vision for a nuclear-free world must begin with the Korean peninsula. There have been growing calls from some in South Korea, and most recently from Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, for the country to develop its own nuclear arsenal in the face of continued provocations from North Korea. The UN Security Council imposed a tough new set of sanctions on Pyongyang in the wake of its nuclear tests and missile launches. In response, North Korea has fired off several more missiles and vowed another nuclear test. President Park said the North would self-destruct if it continues to go down this path, and said that it's a problem that should not be neglected, as it will lead to an irreparable catastrophe on the Korean peninsula and the collapse of the foundation for peace and order in Northeast Asia and the world. President Park also said she would continue to impose sanctions on North Korea instead of pursuing dialogue in order to induce change in Pyongyang. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
When President Park Geun-hye sits down for talks with her counterparts from the U.S., Japan, and China, she is also expected to delve into the issue of denuclearizing North Korea. For more on what's likely to be on the agenda during the bilateral summits, we turn to Connie Kim.
The growing threat of a nuclear-armed North Korea will be the main item on the agenda for South Korean President Park Geun-hye during back-to-back summits with the leaders of the U.S., Japan, and China in Washington on Thursday. Prior to a trilateral meeting between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, President Park and President Obama will likely reaffirm their commitment in denuclearizing Pyongyang. In order to bring about substantial outcome, experts say Seoul must bring up a specific agenda to Washington.
Most agreements between South Korea and the U.S. were made by request of Seoul. The most important point when it comes to North Korea's nuclear issues is whether Washington's nuclear umbrella will cover South Korea as well. Seoul must be specific in its calls to give a strong message to Pyongyang.
Cooperation between President Park and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on pressuring Pyongyang is expected to accelerate following progress on one of the most contentious issues between them, the settlement on the so-called comfort women issue reached late last year. However, the two may still engage in discussions on the implementation of the landmark deal in the wake of Tokyo's denials of the fourth nature of its wartime sexual slavery program. When the South Korean leader sits down for a one-on-one meeting with her Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, President Park will focus on reaffirming China's cooperation on denuclearizing the North. The possible deployment of the U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD in South Korea is likely to be up for talks, but experts doubt any tangible outcome will come out from the bilateral meeting.
The THAAD issue is very important between South Korea and China. However, at the same time, the deployment of THAAD issue is very important issue between the United States and China. So I think all parties need more time to coordinate the different national interests.
The back-to-back summits will be President Park's first meetings with their regional counterparts since North Korea's nuclear test and long-range ballistic missile launch. And the results are expected to shape the way how leaders deal with North Korea's nuclear provocations in the future. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now let's take a look at what's expected of the Trilateral summit between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, set to take place at midnight Korea time. According to our Handaeun, strengthening cooperation on the implementation of the latest North Korea sanctions is likely to take center stage.
On the sidelines of the fourth nuclear security summit, President Park Geun-hye, U.S. President Barack Obama, and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will hold a trilateral summit at midnight Friday, Korea time. The meeting, which last took place in 2014, is garnering extra attention as it comes after the landmark South Korea-Japan agreement on wartime sex slaves that has thawed the icy relations between the two neighboring countries. Amid the conciliatory atmosphere, the three nations are expected to focus on strengthening implementation of the latest sanctions on North Korea.
Ways to boost three-way cooperation in the execution of North Korea's sanctions will likely take center stage during the talks. Strengthening trilateral security ties will also be part of the summit agenda.
Most experts say the summit will be a chance for the three nations to reconfirm their stance against North Korea's provocations rather than coming up with a new strategy for dealing with the North.
Beijing has taken part in the international sanctions on North Korea, while Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have also imposed separate individual sanctions. Against this backdrop, no new strategy or agreement is expected. They will focus on making sure the North Korea sanctions are fully implemented.
While the three leaders will try not to provoke China too much, experts say the biggest challenge for South Korea will be to boost ties with the U.S. and Japan, while at the same time maintain healthy relations with China. Handaeun, Arirang News.
And of course, North Korea will be a likely topic when U.S. President Barack Obama holds a one-on-one with Chinese President Xi Jinping this week on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington. Our Park Jung-hong files us this report.
Joint efforts to step up pressure on an increasingly belligerent North Korea will be a key focus of the talks. The meeting between Presidents Obama and Xi comes at a key time, as Pyongyang has been stoking tension in the region by threatening attacks and firing a series of ballistic missiles into the sea.
There obviously are a wide range of issues that the United States and China are able to effectively coordinate on. The best example of that recently is that, our efforts to work together to isolate and apply further pressure on the North Korean regime for their destabilizing activities on the Korean Peninsula.
The summit is drawing extra attention as the leaders will hold in-depth discussions on the recent UN Security Council sanctions resolution on North Korea and its implementation. President Obama is expected to urge China to play the leading role in carrying out the sanctions while acknowledging Beijing's efforts in drawing up and adopting the UN resolution. President Xi is likely to underscore the need for dialogue with North Korea under a broader framework. Pundits say he may propose restarting the long-stalled six-party talks to discuss the issues of denuclearization, together with forging a peace treaty that would replace the decades-old armistice agreement on the Korean Peninsula. Diplomatic sources in Washington have also been speculating on whether Seoul and Washington's plan to deploy a powerful U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD to the Korean Peninsula will come up during discussions. Beijing has expressed its strong objections on numerous occasions, saying THAAD's radar system would be able to monitor its territory. Other issues set for discussion include the militarization of the South China Sea, cybersecurity, and China's questionable human rights record. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Turning to the local political arena, the men and women hoping to win seats in the nation's parliament got an early start on the first day of the official campaign period for the April general elections. Shin Se-min updates us on their activities.
Seconds after the clock struck midnight, the candidates representing the country's three main political parties hit the streets, marking the beginning of the 13-day campaign period ahead of the general election on April 13th. They spoke with merchants about the difficulties they confront in the face of slow economic growth and heard from young Koreans struggling to start up a business. The three parties are laser-focused on winning support in crucial districts in the Seoul metropolitan area, a key battleground accounting for nearly half of the parliamentary seats up for grabs. The chairman of the ruling Saenuri Party, Kim Moo-sung, visited 10 different districts around the capital, supporting the Conservative Party's candidates.
We're staying all night up to fight and secure a majority in parliament. Are you with us?
The interim leader of the main opposition Minju Party of Korea, Kim Jong-in, stressed the importance of this year's election.
The April election should be a referendum on the ruling party and the government's failure to boost the economy. Let's work to fix the things that have gone wrong.
The founder of the minor opposition People's Party, An Chol-soo, stuck to his message of a new politics to overhaul Korea's political system.
This election will determine whether we hold on to the two-party system or shift to a three-party system and bring about change.
With the parties in full campaign mode, each party has its own strategy for different regions around the country. The ruling Saenuri Party is aiming for the largest piece of the pie in the Seoul metro area, putting its heaviest hitters out on the campaign trail, while the main opposition party is looking to boost its support in Chungcheongdo province, where there are 27 seats at stake. The minor opposition People's Party is focusing on the Honam region, a traditional liberal stronghold consisting of North and South Jeollado provinces, putting it in direct competition with the Minju Party. The candidates have just 13 days to canvass voters and spread their messages, so the battle is just beginning. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
One of the key questions that's emerged ahead of the election is whether the liberal opposition parties will join forces to improve their chances in races against the ruling Conservative Party. Park Ji-won has the responses from all three sides.
The prospect of an alliance between the liberal opposition parties has become one of the most hotly contested issues in the run-up to the general election. Speaking to reporters from various points on the campaign trail on Thursday, the leaders of the three main parties offered their thoughts on the matter. Ruling Saenuri Party leader Kim Moo-sung said any move to unite the opposition before the election would make a mockery of the public. The Conservative Party chief said that a political party is meant to be a group of people sharing the same identity and ideology, and the public will not buy an opposition merger because of their recent split due to ideological differences. He added that if the parties were to unite before the election just because the odds are against them, it would be very myopic of them. The main opposition Minju Party once again urged the minor opposition People's Party to join forces with it, saying it is the will of the public. Former party leader Moon Jae-in said those who would block a Liberal Party coalition would be committing a sin against history. Interim leader Kim Jong-in also said the party will fully support any moves to put up a single Liberal candidate. However, People's Party leader An Cheol-soo once again rejected the proposal, saying if the Minju Party really wants to unite the liberal opposition, it should withdraw its candidates from the races where they are in competition with one another. An left the main opposition party back in December and has been advocating that a viable third party is necessary to overhaul Korea's political system. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Turning our focus to national defense now, the South Korean military will develop 5 military satellites by the year 2022 that will be used to surveil North Korea. The Defense Ministry says the satellite will be equipped with state-of-the-art radar that can detect targets even under cloudy skies. The satellites will also be capable of identifying Pyongyang's mobile launch pads in a matter of hours. Ministry officials say the satellites will also allow Seoul to keep better track of the communist regime's key military facilities, including its nuclear and missile infrastructure. China sent over 1 million soldiers to fight alongside North Korea troops during the Korean War, and thousands of the fallen are still laid to rest in South Korean soil today. In recent years, Seoul has sent the remains of hundreds of soldiers back home, and it paid tribute to another group today. Kim Hyun-bin has the full story.
A Chinese flag covers the caskets. After a moment of silence, the caskets are loaded onto a plane bound for China. It's all part of a repatriation ceremony for 36 Chinese soldiers who were killed in action during the 1950 to 1953 Korean War. Finally, their wish to return home will come true. It's the third repatriation of Chinese soldiers since an agreement on the matter was reached by Korea and China in 2014. Since then, the remains of 505 Chinese soldiers have been repatriated. The ceremony at Incheon Airport on Thursday was held with Korea's Vice Defense Minister and China's Vice Minister of Civil Affairs in attendance.
This is a token of strategic cooperation between Korea and China, as well as a token of peace in Northeast Asia.
Korea-China relations will improve. We will continue to strengthen our relationship.
This was the first time the Korean military conducted DNA identification tests on the remains, following criticism last year that previous repatriated remains were from people not of Chinese descent. Over 1.3 million Chinese soldiers fought in the Korean War, and it's estimated the remains of 110,000 are still buried in South Korea. The remains sent back on Thursday will be interred at a national cemetery in Liaoning, a province in China that borders North Korea and the West Sea. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Could it be another false dawn or the start of a gradual recovery for the Korean economy? The country's manufacturing output rose at the fastest pace in over 6 years in February, while business sentiment also improved. Hwang Ji-hye looks beyond the numbers.
Korea's output in the mining and manufacturing sectors was strong in February. Statistics Korea says production in the sectors rose 3.3% from the previous month, marking the fastest pace of on-month expansion since September 2009. The rise came on the back of a pickup in demand for semiconductors, a sector that saw production spike. Demand for mobile chips has risen as Korea's biggest tech giant Samsung Electronics released its new flagship Galaxy S7 smartphones. Adding to the optimism, central bank data shows that manufacturers' business sentiment rose for the first time in 5 months. Still, experts are doubtful about whether the robust figure will last.
The effect coming from chip makers could be temporary. Apart from that, export volume also rebounded in February, but it's mainly coming from the increase in workdays, as that was a leap month. The growth rate of the export volume is not even that big, so it's hard to say exports are picking up pace.
And although the overall industrial output that includes all of the country's sectors rebounded in February, it's a mere uptick, as output growth in domestic demand dragged down the rise in the manufacturing sector. Retail sales dropped nearly 2% from the previous month.
It's hard to expect a drastic improvement in domestic consumption, as consumer sentiment has withered a lot.
In fact, Korea's central bank says the amount of excess funds held by households and nonprofit organizations hit a record high last year, meaning that people are saving instead of spending amid the lingering economic uncertainties. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
In one of the starkest indicators yet of Korea's rapidly aging population, newly released figures show workers in their 50s and above now outnumber those in their 20s and 30s. According to data by Statistics Korea, more than 9.3 million people in their 20s and 30s were employed as of last year, making up 36.1% of the working population. Over 9.6 million workers in their 50s and above made up 37.2%, outnumbering young workers for the first time since the agency began collecting related data in 2000. The average age of a worker in Korea stood at 44.4 years, up 0.2 years from the previous year. According to experts, this uptrend in the number of older workers will continue as the extension of retirement age went into effect this year. The G5, the latest smartphone from Korean tech giant LG Electronics, hits the shelves on this Thursday. Watchers say the phone's innovative features could make it a big hit with consumers. Kim Min-ji looks into whether it could help LG smash the dominance of Apple and Samsung.
Fun is what LG Electronics is promoting with its new G5, which hit shelves on Thursday. With the price tag of roughly $700 in Korea, it's the industry's first modular smartphone, which means users can connect various add-ons to instantly improve camera or sound functions. Aside from the modules, other accessories provide the user with an entirely new experience. With the 360 cam, I can capture everything around me thanks to two 180-degree lenses on the front and back of the device. LG says it was thinking outside the box this time around.
Our aim was to get away from the conventional smartphone and give users an experience they've never had before. We'll continue to develop unique products to differentiate ourselves from the competition.
And so far, LG seems to be on track, with the majority of consumers who've tried out the product already satisfied.
I like that there's two types of lenses that can take both wide and original shots. It's easy to change from one mode to another.
It's an extremely modern design, so I think many young people will like it. I need to change my phone soon, and it's impressive enough for me to consider it as one of my options.
But will it be enough to turn the tide? LG's local rival Samsung Electronics recently began sales of its new models, while Apple has released lower-end smartphones in emerging markets. On top of that, fierce competition from Chinese rivals has eroded LG's share in the global market. Analysts say although the G5 turned out well, it all boils down to how many units LG can shift.
It remains to be seen whether the older generation will buy the G5 due to the modules. Besides, the market is already saturated, so a lot depends on how well LG can appeal to and target the people planning to switch phones. Now that Samsung's phones are already out, LG should use this time well to market its products before Apple releases its next iPhone.
The early popularity of the G5 will likely help LG turn a profit in the second quarter of this year. But analysts say down the road, the company with the best two-track approach, namely expanding production of lower-end phones while turning a profit from high-end models, will be best placed to ride the wave of the flooded smartphone market. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
That brings us to the end of this hour's newscast. More coming your way at 10 p.m. Korea time, so do join us then. For now, thank you for watching.